Welcome to our June Sea Change community interview. My name is Erin Conn and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Sea Change at AAAS. We are thrilled to share that the University of California system has joined our initiative. With support from the UC Office of the President, all 10 UC institutions are charter members of Sea Change. This month, we're speaking with Dr. Marguerite Bonous-Hammarth of UC Irvine and Dr. Kass of UC Davis. Marguerite, would you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with folks. I'm Marguerite Bonous-Hammarth. My preferred pronouns are she, hers. I am Assistant Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the University of California, Irvine Office of Inclusive Excellence. I work with Doug Haynes and a wonderful team focused on more centralizing approaches for advancing our equity issues on the campus.
Great, welcome. And Phil, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Phil Kass, and I am the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at UC Davis. I'm also, by the way, a professor of analytic epidemiology in the School of Veterinary Medicine and the School of Medicine at UC Davis as well. I came to the Office of Academic Affairs after being a department chair, being heavily involved in our academic senate leadership, and wanted to really work in academic affairs because I saw that this would be the office above all others here that could become an arm of social justice for our academic community. And so that's why I came about 9 years ago and really enjoy being here.
It's great to have you both here with us today. Both Irvine and Davis are Sea Change institutional Browns awardees, and the two of you have led the Sea Change process on your campuses for several years now. What does having the rest of the UC system on board mean for the work that you'll continue to do on your campus?
Well, I'll start. First off, the effort was really a very broad effort. And we had some wonderful conversations with Shirley Malcolm and others, Beth Rudy, before even endeavoring to go down and actually broaden our work with Sea Change. As a system, though, I think joining, it's a fantastic opportunity to see that this is truly going to be a systems focus, systems approach. As with so many of our endeavors as a system, we can now be more comprehensively focused on sharing ideas, understanding some strategies that we know have been time-tested, some evidence-based work, but also exploring ways in which we might, as a system, look at things very differently and uniquely going forward. We've had a lot of activities in the past that we've done across the systems, which is really uniquely tailored to each campus's innovation and their own strategies. So it really brings a wealth of information, intellectual capacity, and just a lot of bridge building across the system for where we can go.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking this question. And I want to give a lot of credit to Dr. Shirley Malcolm and President Michael Drake for really taking this remarkable initiative. Well, to answer your question, we've got the advantage that across our campuses, we actually share common policies that govern many of these areas that are actually addressed in the Sea Change application. So some examples of these would be the Faculty Code of Conduct, system-wide sexual harassment, sexual violence policies, a forthcoming policy on abusive conduct, otherwise known as bullying, shared governance, peer evaluation of advancement, sharing common academic titles with salaries that correspond to the ranks and steps, and having centrally mandated salary equity programs, to name a few of the kinds of policies that all of our campuses really have in common. Now, when I talk to my colleagues at other universities across the United States, one consistent theme that I hear is that there is often only superficial or lukewarm support for the initiatives by their own leaders. In other words, the leaders like the idea, but they don't actually want to invest very much in it. And this is what I think really distinguishes the University of California. Our leadership in the UC Office of the President not only believes in initiatives to enhance student and faculty diversity, inclusive excellence, equity, and social justice, but they're actually enthusiastic about investing in it as well. And so they have our back on this. And although we may be 10 campuses spread out around the state, we're still one University of California, and that alone makes us very powerful. There's a saying that as California goes, so goes the nation, and that means that if our detractors in the DEI realm try to push us, we have a central administration at the UC Office of the President that will be resilient and push back, and that administration knows that we'll have their backs too.
And having gone through the awards process already, what are some advantages you think the other UC institutions will have now that they'll go through the process together as a cohort? What will make that cohort unique from other Sea Change cohorts of institutions that are across the country?
Well, I think in terms of going through as a cohort together, there's wonderful collaboration. When we embarked on our Sea Change initiative, we had the wonderful learning opportunities given through working with Phil Kass and his team and really understanding a process that helped us navigate it very uniquely that was UCI owned. And I'm sure each of the campuses have their relevant contexts that they're being mindful of as they go forward. But a major advantage, we call it the power of 10, is being more efficient and effective, right? Not recreating the wheel in some of these processes, such as collecting the data, how we're interpreting some of the data that we're reporting, but also being able to set up some practices so that it's easier down the road for all of the campuses to gauge their success on some common items, even though they're very approaching this very uniquely. Also, of course, there's the advantage of the teams connecting with one another across the campuses, sharing that learning and their potential for approaches in action planning down the road. And I'm sure that we will see opportunities all across all of the campuses to work together on some of these common areas of opportunity, for example, even though we might approach them very differently. But there might be opportunities where we would come together with our funding and our creative energies to address some of these areas.
Well, I think I would just reiterate what Marguerite said so very, very well, and that is that you may have 10 different campuses, and we may have our own unique approaches to addressing Sea Change in terms of how we apply, in terms of what our action plans are. But the beauty of this is that I think our campuses are bound very closely together. We all, in a sense, know each other very, very well. I work very closely, for example, with the other vice provosts around the system. And I think by sharing ideas, sharing notes, sharing concerns that we have and working together, that all of the campuses will actually be strengthened in terms of developing more robust Sea Change applications. There are a lot of technical issues involved in doing the applications, and I think being able to meet and confer about what the best approaches are in terms of how one divides up the colleges, the schools, the departments, the disciplines, and so on, is advantageous. But to me, the most important part of our Sea Change application was actually devising the action plan. And we didn't have anybody to really reach out to for guidance in terms of doing that before. I would hope that as we move forward as a cohort, that we can interact with each other and give each other advice about what sort of things really belong in an action plan, and whether or not the goals that would be embedded in there, 5-year goals, are attainable and realistic. So I see us as basically still one large organism that is able to be mutualistic and helping each other with our applications.
Shifting gears a bit now, Marguerite, you've recently organized an equity-focused event for the UC system. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. I want to first give credit to a wonderful UCOP, UC Office of the President program, advancing faculty diversity. It was really because of that program, which is it provides the ability to support different initiatives across the campus. It's a competitive call for proposals and then some funding that follows. We were able to receive some select funding from that program to host in April 2022 the Comparing Relevant Equity Advisor Tools to Empower or Create Symposium. It really was a brainchild of both working with Susan Carlson in the Office of the President, Douglas Haynes at our Office of Inclusive Excellence at UCI, and others to talk about the equity advisor experience across the campuses, which have been very implemented very differently across different campuses, all to great advantage. So it wasn't comparing the method or those approaches, but really talking about some of the issues. These are equity advisor leaders. Generally, they're peers, working with peers. At UCI, we have a process of our faculty working with their peers for advancing faculty diversity in recruitment and retention best practices. We also have a decade mentor program focused on the graduate level, and we're now piloting a staff equity fellows program at the staff level. And this was an opportunity to really gather across the campuses all of those equity leaders, not just equity advisors, right? We had vice provosts, we had academic personnel represented, we had advancing faculty diversity project leaders represented, and we were all talking about some key issues that have been very germane to advancing the work of those individuals, but also looking at it from a very systems approach. One of the things we hope to do in the future is continue convening different conversations virtually across learning groups across all of the campuses. So that's one of the goals. We have some great SAGE leaders coming in to have some brief topical discussions virtually, and then we'll be convening on the campuses, hosting hopefully some conversations to advance the discussion a bit more. We actually focused on several different areas, and I'll also defer to Phil to talk a little bit about the ways he was engaged. And we had presentations both from a systems perspective, so Susan Carlson and Pamela Brown gave us some really unique looks at the 2030 goals related to our faculty diversity efforts as a system. We really welcomed in some external educators and researchers to share their insights with us. So Sylvia Hurtado was a keynote speaker. And then we really focused on learning from each other. And so we really were really pleased to have many different representatives from across the system speak to their equity advisor models, specific approaches they are taking for faculty hiring and advancement of faculty throughout the system, also looking at mentoring and retention efforts, and then talking about the UC sea change approach. What would that mean? And so we had Yvette Goulat actually present and Shirley Malcolm. So we really felt privileged to have folks make this space, both in person and virtually, to attend.
Phil, you also gave a presentation at the Create Symposium. What was it like for you being in the room, seeing the UC system coming together around this topic, knowing that the system was now joining Sea Change as a system?
Yeah, that's really a great question. Well, first, actually, let me just say that it was really a fantastic event, and Marguerite really has my respect and admiration for spearheading that effort, because it was an enormous effort and took months, even from the point that I became involved, to really pull it off. So really, congratulations, Marguerite. That was really wonderful. What really struck me was that while every UC campus shares the similar values about the need for equity, both in the recruitment and advancement processes, it's really clear that we all have different ways of achieving it. For example, Marguerite was talking about an equity advisor model, which a number of campuses do. UC Davis back in 2012 received an NSF Advanced Institutional Transformation grant that actually took a different approach that was modeled, I believe, on the University of Michigan STRIDE program, and we call it STED, Strength Through Equity and Diversity, which is a faculty-driven group of individuals who train recruitment committees about best practices in hiring and about implicit biases. So there was an opportunity for UC Davis at this symposium to present that as another way of achieving what an equity advisor model would achieve as well. And again, this is the beauty of this type of a symposium, and where I hope sea change in the UC system will be able to go, that we can convene periodically and share ideas and share best practices. Many of the grants that I've written at UC Davis are derivative of what people have done at other institutions, both in the UC system as well as outside the UC system. So this is, again, a huge strength now of our all joining Sea Change. By learning about each other's practices, we're going to have a built-in knowledge base and a resource pool to learn from each other, and we'll be able to improve our own campus-specific practices doing that.
It sounds like it was a wonderful event, and I'm so grateful to you, Marguerite, for putting it on, and Phil for being involved, because now you've given us at Sea Change, as well as our other member institutions, a model for how to create a very productive convening. And so to wrap up, I'd love to ask you both two questions. So we'll tackle the first question now. What's something that has changed for the better on your campus, or a challenge that you've overcome since becoming a Sea Change charter member?
Well, I'll start, and thank you for this question, because I think this is a really important one to think about as we join together more as a UC going forward in Sea Change initiative. I think clearly being part of the Sea Change as a charter member gave us a level of visibility, both from the professions, because many of our STEM community members are members of AAAS or are a part of that larger professional association, as well as giving us the leverage to make this a very attractive incentive to work and broaden the work on our campus. So we've had efforts and really had a track record in developing faculty diversity efforts on this campus in many different areas, not just centrally, but our deans have been engaged and so forth all across the campus, administration as well as academic units. But what Sea Change did was really require us basically to collaborate in a much more comprehensive effort, much more broadly. So our planning committee included a variety of members across both the academic areas but also administrative areas to help guide us on the work and review of our institutional data for the action agenda. And again, we were outreaching to other UC partners, Davis and others who were even thinking about Sea Change at that time. I think they're forming that type of a community. It really gives you invaluable guidance about some of the issues, your interpretations, the things that have been tried and worked in the past, and the things that you really need to improve on or approach in a different way. So again, so you're not recreating the wheel and you're being as efficient as possible in what seems to be a really large endeavor. Because it's such a large endeavor, there's broad communications that I think is still a challenge. And one of the things that being a Sea Change partner that really helps us is because you have a natural set of places to go to communicate your message. You have Sea Change Institute, you have work with other partners outside of the UC system, as well as internally you can now work. One of the things that we're doing at the Irvine campus, we're not just focusing our UCI Sea Change on STEM units. We're actually broadening this out to all of our academic units on the campus. And all of the units want to be engaged because of the prestige involved with working with AAAS and Sea Change program, but also just that type of community. We're learning and we're really focused on a specific action plan, and that's something that Sea Change requires of its members going forward. And so I think it really gives one a blueprint. So you're not just throwing things up against the wall to see what sticks, but you're really coming at this from a very evidence-informed way to build on evidence-informed practices.
So that's actually a really interesting question, and I'll tell you a little story. I actually started thinking about things that we could do at UC Davis before I became vice provost, because I was involved in the early discussions about bringing Sea Change to the United States. And, and I thought about what was it that we could do differently at UC Davis that would be consistent with Sea Change aspirations. And so when I became vice provost, that actually helped me, in a sense, reimagine my new position as one that would include writing grants to try to do interesting initiatives. And the first one that I did was through the UC Advancing Faculty Diversity Program. So when we initially wrote our action plan for our Bronze Award, we had just received a grant from the AFD program for recruitment initiatives. And in the action plan, we committed to using this grant to test out new practices to specifically enhance the diversity of our applicant and our hiring pools. And then we committed to reporting the results of that portion of our action plan to Sea Change in our annual report, which is what we did. Now, what was really interesting about this particular grant is that we placed extreme emphasis on using contributions to diversity, equity, and inclusion statements as part of the procedures that we're doing that year off of our grant. The reason that we did that was because, in my opinion, the use of those statements is literally the most powerful tool that we have got in the UC system to try to make changes, tangible changes in the way that we do recruitments. And our results literally surpassed even our most optimistic expectations. Now, here was the problem. Even though these had been mandatory on our campus for several years, our campus really wasn't prepared to use them. We didn't really know how to use these statements. And so what happened was, when the success of our grant became known, it brought to the surface a groundswell of opposition to using these statements as part of the hiring process, and that in turn led to a academic senate referendum opposing the use of these statements as mandatory tools for hiring. Now, the referendum lost, but just barely. Now, and the silver lining from that was that it then prompted us to try to find ways to really bring the campus together on this issue as much as we could. And we did that by writing even more grants. And those grants were designed to develop online modules or video presentations to teach our faculty how to effectively use these statements in the advancement process as well as the recruitment process. So some of these tools we have completed doing, others we're in the process of doing. And when we are done, we intend to offer these tools, when they're ready, to all the UC campuses for their use. So that is something, I think, a story that says how something has changed for the better, and yet has been a challenge that we've had to overcome.
My last question for you as we wrap up is, what advice would you give to our colleagues in the Sea Change community who want to bring Sea Change to their campuses but don't know where to start with administration?
So that's a really good question. And I think my answer to that is going to be formed by, again, some of the problems that we saw at UC Davis when we realized that there were a number of our faculty who actually did not support the approaches that we were taking to try to diversify our applicant and our hiring pools. And the lesson, again, that I learned from that is that to the extent that you can reach out to the academic senate and gain support from them, the more likely you will be to be successful. So for the individual faculty members on our campuses for whom initiatives like this are important, and there are a great many faculty who make outstanding contributions in the DEI realm, I would recommend that they work within the academic senate to try to bring attention to them about the importance of doing sea change. There are standing Senate committees that address these kinds of issues. Each campus has at least one of those within the Senate, and that would be, I think, the perfect place to begin. Make Senate leadership aware that this is a new initiative and that it's important and that it represents values that we should be sharing and encouraging the administration to partner with us as academic Senate members on. That to me would be the very best and most productive way to build a sort of a groundswell, bottoms up, locally formulated initiative to support the sea change application process.
I think I'll add to that by suggesting that you look for ways to build bridges in and out, meaning you're leveraging the opportunities and the conversations you're having internally across your campus. Many times you're working with partners on DEI endeavors. It's partnership work. And so you can easily identify the 2 and 3 and the 4 and plus individuals who have not only evidence of success and projects that really could be explored in greater depth at a broader level on your campus. And so you can brainstorm with those individuals. If you're a director or you have the opportunity and the resources to convene conversations like this, you can host these conversations to even just get folks started thinking about it, and then you can go seeking information, because there might be partners already on your campus, especially in your academic personnel areas, in your vice chancellor, vice provost areas, that are already pursuing or thinking about, have heard about sea change and want to participate, and you now give them an additional opportunity to and a willing volunteer to go forward in that endeavor. So you can build in and out, I think, to move, because you're going to need a network to move this through. As Phil referenced and we've been talking about, there is no one person who can make, first of all, do a very complete, comprehensive, and good self-study, but then to create an action plan. It really has to be built on not only what information you're gathering and interpreting, but what you're really going to be able to do. And these many players have to be a part of it, many agents of change.
Excellent advice from you both. Thank you again for joining us for this interview and sharing your experiences with Sea Change, your hopes for the UC system, and sharing a bit about the work that you're both continuing on your campuses. If folks want to connect with you, I know you're both in the Sea Change community. People can seek you out and message you there. We are so appreciative of you and your institutions for being early adopters of Sea Change and being charter members, and we're also so appreciative of you two as individuals for doing this work every day and being part of our community. So thank you again for joining us. It was great to chat with you, and I'll speak with you both again soon.